had spent 2 years running away from everything. Now, as his small freighter approached the dead moon at the edge of known space, he finally felt like he had run far enough. The moon had no name that humans used. The maps called it KR7b but preferred to think of it as nowhere. That was exactly what he wanted. Nowhere. No people asking how he was doing. No friends trying to pull him back into the world. No memories waiting around every corner. His ship's computer announced their arrival with a soft chime. Through the cockpit window, could see the abandoned alien outpost sitting on the moon's surface like a forgotten toy. They had built it 3,000 years ago, back when they were one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. Now they were gone, and their building sat empty across 100 worlds. Nobody knew what happened to The official theory said they simply left, packed up their entire civilization and flew to another galaxy. Had spent 20 years of his life studying their ruins, and he never believed that theory. Something about it felt wrong, like a lie told to children to help them sleep at night. His colleagues at the university had laughed when he said so. They laughed even harder when he suggested they had not left but hidden from what they asked. Did not have an answer, so they stopped listening. 6 months later, he lost his position. 6 months after that, he bought salvage rights to this outpost and left human space behind. The freighter touched down on the landing pad with a gentle bump, sat in his seat for a long moment, looking at the outpost through the window. It was larger than he expected. The main structure rose 3 stories high, with curved walls that caught the dim light of the distant sun. Smaller buildings spread out from the center like fingers reaching across the dust. He was alone out here. The nearest human colony was 40 light-years away. If something went wrong, no one would come to help. No one would even know. Good thought. That was exactly what he wanted. He put on his environment suit and stepped outside. The moon had no atmosphere, so he walked in perfect silence. His boots left prints in dust that had not been disturbed in 3,000 years. The outpost's main door stood before him, a tall oval of dark metal covered in symbols he could not read. Placed his hand on the door. He expected to need tools, cutting equipment, maybe even explosives. Instead, the door simply opened. Lights flickered on inside, soft and blue, as if the building had been waiting for someone to come home. That was strange. Very strange. Technology should have been dead after all this time, had explored dozens of their ruins, and he had never seen systems that still worked. He stepped inside carefully, ready for anything. The interior was surprisingly clean. Dust covered the floors, but the walls were intact, and the ceiling showed no signs of damage. The architecture was alien but beautiful, all flowing curves and organic shapes that made feel like he was walking through the inside of a living creature. He spent the first week making the outpost livable. The environmental systems came online with almost no effort, filling the rooms with breathable air and comfortable warmth. The water recyclers worked. Even some of the lights responded to his touch, brightening when he entered a room and dimming when he left. Told himself this was just good luck. Engineering was legendary after all. Maybe this outpost had simply been built better than the others. Maybe the cold vacuum of space had preserved everything perfectly. There were logical explanations. But deep in his gut, something whispered that logic had nothing to do with it. He set up his living quarters in what he guessed was once an office or study. The room had large windows that looked out across the moon's surface toward the stars. At night, if you could call it night in a place with no real day, would sit by those windows and watch the distant lights of galaxies he would never visit. He thought about during those times, his wife. She had loved the stars more than anyone he ever knew. She used to say that every light in the sky was a story waiting to be told. She died 2 years ago when her colony ship suffered a drive failure. One moment she was there, sending him a message about how excited she was to see her new home. The next moment she was gone, turned into light and radiation somewhere in the empty space between stars. Had stopped believing in stories after that. On his 10th day in the Outpost, he began exploring the lower levels. The building went deeper than the salvage surveys had shown. Tunnels stretched down into the moon's crust, connecting to chambers and rooms that had no clear purpose. Mapped them carefully, making notes on his tablet, trying to understand what they had been doing here. Most of the rooms were empty. Some held broken equipment he could not identify. One contained what looked like a library, with thousands of data crystals arranged on curved shelves. Planned to spend months going through them once he got his translation software working properly. Then he found the sealed chamber. It was at the end of a long tunnel, hidden behind a wall that looked solid but proved to be a cleverly disguised door. Only found it because he noticed the air flow was wrong, like there was a space behind the wall that should not exist. When the hidden door finally slid open, found himself looking at something impossible. A stasis pod, glowing faintly with power, sitting in the center of an otherwise empty room. The pod was still active. The displays on its surface showed readings that recognized from his years of study. Life signs: stable, healthy. Someone was inside, someone alive. Stood frozen in the doorway. This changed everything. A living was the greatest discovery in the history of human. It meant answers to questions that had puzzled scientists for generations. It meant proof that his theories were right, that they had not simply left. He reached out to touch the pod's surface. It was warm under his fingers, humming with ancient energy. And then the displays changed. The readings shifted. The hum grew louder. The pod was opening. 3,000 years of sleep was ending, and the man who had come to the edge of the universe to be alone was about to have company. The stasis pod opened with a sound like a dying breath. Cold mist poured out across the floor and stepped back as a figure rose from inside. It was tall, nearly 7 feet, with a body like an insect wrapped in flowing robes. Its skin was dark and hard, like polished stone, and patterns of soft blue light moved beneath the surface. 4 arms hung at its sides, ending in hands with too many fingers. Its face had no mouth that could see, just 2 large eyes that caught the light and reflected it back like mirrors. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The alien stared at with those strange eyes and stared back, his heart beating so hard he could hear it in his ears. Then they made a sound. It was not words exactly, more like music, a series of tones that rose and fell in complex patterns. Did not understand, but he recognized it from his studies. It was a greeting, a formal way of saying hello to a stranger. He responded the best he could, using sounds he had practiced years ago in university. His pronunciation was terrible, he knew, but the alien's eyes widened with what might have been surprise. The next few days were the hardest of his life. Communication was slow and frustrating. He used translation software, hand gestures, drawings, and sometimes just guessing, though for its part learned faster than seemed possible. Within a week it could speak broken English. Within 2 weeks it could hold a conversation. Its name was. That was not exactly what it called itself, but it was the closest human sounds could get. Had been a records keeper, responsible for maintaining the history and knowledge of its people. It had been chosen for a special purpose, placed in stasis when the rest of them made their final decision. Did not understand what that meant at first. Final decision about what? Showed him. The records keeper led to the library he had found earlier, with a touch, activated systems that had not even known were there. The room filled with light, and suddenly was standing inside a holographic display that stretched in all directions. Stars surrounded him, galaxies, the entire universe mapped out in glowing points of light. Began to speak, and the display changed as the alien told its story. Long ago they were not alone. The galaxy was full of intelligent species, hundreds of them, building civilizations and reaching for the stars. They were among the oldest and most advanced. They had explored further than anyone, pushed deeper into the unknown, asked questions that other species were afraid to ask. And then they found something. The display zoomed out past the galaxy, into the dark, empty space between galaxies. There, in that void where nothing should exist, something waited. They called it a word that's translator could not handle, tried to explain in English, settling eventually on a term that makes blood run cold. The Halu. It was not a creature, not in any way that made sense. It was more like a pattern, a self-sustaining equation that existed in the spaces between thoughts. It had been drifting in the void for longer than stars had existed, waiting for minds to appear, waiting for something to eat. Because that was what the Hollow did. It ate minds. It consumed consciousness, absorbed knowledge, fed on the very thing that made intelligent beings intelligent. The more advanced a species became, the more visible they were to the Hollow. The more they knew, the brighter they burned, and the brighter they burned, the hungrier the Hollow became. They discovered this too late. They had already spread across 1,000 worlds, built networks that connected billions of minds, accumulated knowledge that made them shine like a beacon in the dark. The Hollow noticed them. The Hollow came. The display showed what happened next. Watched as entire planets went dark, as populations vanished overnight, as the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known was systematically consumed. They fought back with every weapon they had, but you cannot kill a pattern. You cannot destroy an idea. The Hollow simply absorbed their attacks and grew stronger. In the end, they made a choice, a terrible choice. They could not defeat the Hollow, they could not escape it, but they could stop feeding it. They could burn their libraries, destroy their networks, erase their own existence from the universe. If they were gone, truly gone, the Hollow might lose interest. It might drift back to the void. Other species might survive. So they chose extinction. They did it themselves, realized with horror. They killed themselves to save everyone else. Almost everyone corrected. One had to remain. One had to stay behind to explain, to warn whoever came next, to tell them what was waiting in the dark. Was that one? The last, left alive for 3,000 years in a stasis pod, waiting for someone to find them. Felt sick. His whole life he had studied them, admired them, wished he could understand them better. Now he understood and he wished he did not. But was not finished. The alien asked questions of its own. Who was, where did he come from, how far had his species spread? Answered honestly. He told about humanity, about their colonies across dozens of star systems, about their communication networks that connected billions of people, about their constant hunger for knowledge and discovery. With each word, lights grew dimmer. The alien's movements became slower, heavier, as if a great weight was pressing down on it. When finished, stood in silence for a long moment. Then the alien spoke 5 words that changed everything. The Hollow will find you. Wanted to argue. He wanted to say that 3,000 years was a long time, that the Hollow might be gone, that humanity was different somehow. But the words died in his throat as the Outpost's alarms began to sound. Something had entered the star system. Something massive, something that the sensors could not identify, something that should not exist. The Hollow had already found them. Sent his warning to the colonial authority on the fastest communication channel available. He included records, sensor data, everything he had. Then he waited. For 2 days nothing happened. No response came. Began to think they had ignored him, dismissed him as the same crackpot who had lost his university position years ago. He could not blame them. If someone had sent him this message a month ago, he would not have believed it either. Then the reports started coming in. 3 deep space monitoring stations went dark on the same day. Not destroyed, not damaged, just empty. When rescue ships arrived, they found the stations perfectly intact, power running, coffee still warm on the tables, but every person aboard was gone. 217 humans vanished without any sign of struggle or escape. More reports followed. A mining outpost near the galactic rim lost contact. A research vessel studying a distant nebula stopped responding. A colony ship carrying 10,000 people sent one final message before going silent forever. The message was just two words: they're here. Now the colonial authority was listening. Now everyone was listening. Found himself in meetings with admirals and scientists and politicians, speaking through communication screens to people he had never met. Stood beside him, the alien's presence undeniable proof that something had changed. Some people looked at with fear. Others looked with wonder. A few looked with suspicion, as if this might all be some elaborate trick. But the vanishing colonies were not a trick. The empty stations were not a trick. Something was out there and it was hungry. Explained again and again what the hollow was. A pattern that fed on consciousness. A predator that hunted intelligent beings across the universe. It did not invade worlds the way an army would. It invaded minds, slipping inside like water through cracks, dissolving thoughts and absorbing them into itself. The more you knew, the easier it was to take you. They had been brilliant, their minds like palaces of crystal and light. The hollow had found them delicious. Humanity, warned, had made itself visible. Their radio signals, their communication networks, their endless hunger for knowledge and discovery. They had been broadcasting their existence into the universe for centuries, and now something had heard them. The news spread across human space in waves of panic. Within weeks, the colonies were tearing themselves apart with arguments about what to do. Some people called themselves the purists. They said humanity should follow this example, destroy the networks, burn the libraries, return to primitive existence before the hollow consumed everything. Better to live as animals than die as food. Others called themselves the runners. They said humanity should flee, should build ships capable of reaching other galaxies, should find somewhere so far away that the hollow could not follow. The universe was infinite. Surely there was somewhere safe. And then there were the fighters. They refused to accept that something could not be killed. Every problem had a solution. Every enemy had a weakness. Humanity had not conquered the stars by running away or giving up. Watched these arguments happen on news screens and in shouting matches. He watched politicians make speeches and protesters fill streets. He watched humanity fracture under pressure, just as he had feared it would. But watched with different eyes. "This is strange," the alien said one night, as another debate raged on the communication screen. "Your people do not agree." Laughed bitterly. "We never agree, that's one of our biggest problems." "No," said slowly. "You do not understand," the agreed. "When we faced the hollow, we spoke with one voice. Every mind reached the same conclusion. Every individual accepted the same fate. That is how we were able to do what we did. And you think we should do the same?" Turned those mirror-like eyes toward. "I do not know. When we agreed, we chose extinction. Perhaps disagreement leads somewhere different." Before could respond, a new report appeared on the screen. The hollow had reached a major colony world. 10 million humans lived there. The colonial authority was preparing for the worst. But the worst did not come. The hollow reached the planet, touched it with whatever passed for its attention, and then stopped. It did not consume the colony. It did not empty the cities. It simply hung there in space, vast and invisible except to the most sensitive instruments, waiting. 3 days passed, a week. The colony remained intact. People remained alive. Something was wrong with the hollow, or rather, something was wrong with humans. Researchers worked frantically to understand what was happening. They studied the few people who had encountered the hollow and survived, examining their minds with every tool available. They compared human brain patterns to records of brain patterns. What they found changed everything. Human minds were different. Not better, not stronger, just different. Where the thought in perfect order, humans thought in chaos. Where they built crystal palaces of logic, humans built storms of contradiction. A human could believe two opposite things at the same time. A human could love and hate the same person in the same moment. A human could act against their own interests for reasons they themselves did not understand. To the hollow, which fed on information and knowledge, human minds were not a feast. They were noise. Trying to consume a human consciousness was like trying to drink an ocean of static. Possible, maybe, but slow and unsatisfying. Stared at the research results for a long time. Then the alien did something had never seen before. It made a sound that might have been laughter. Your species is too irrational to be consumed efficiently, said. Your greatest weakness is your greatest strength. Shook his head, so we're safe. No, the hollow can still take you, just slower. But this gives us something we did not have before. What? Slights pulsed with new energy. Time to find another way. And for the first time since this nightmare began, felt something he had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. The research station orbited a small planet far from the front lines, had not slept properly in weeks. Neither had anyone else on the team. They called it Project Chaos, which was either a joke or the most honest name anyone had ever given anything. Their goal was simple to say and almost impossible to do. Find a way to fight the hollow using the one advantage humanity had. Their messy, irrational, beautifully contradictory minds worked alongside the human scientists providing knowledge from 3,000 years ago. They had tried everything to stop the hollow: weapons, shields, running, hiding. Nothing worked because the hollow was not a thing that could be destroyed. It was a pattern that existed in the space between thoughts. But they had never tried fighting with chaos. They could not. Their minds were too orderly, too perfect. They thought in straight lines, and the hollow ate straight lines for breakfast. Humans were different. Humans were crooked. Spent long hours staring at data, trying to understand what made human thought so strange. He learned that a single human brain held contradictions that would have driven a mad. Love and fear, hope and despair. The ability to believe something completely and doubt it at the same time. One scientist showed him a brain scan of a human in love. It looked like a storm, with different regions lighting up in patterns that made no logical sense. This is what we are, the scientist said. This is what the hollow cannot easily digest. An idea began to form. If human consciousness was noise to the hollow, what would happen if they made that noise louder? What if they could concentrate it, focus it, blast it directly at the thing that was trying to eat them? They had tried to fight the hollow with weapons. Humans would fight it with themselves. They built a device. It was not really a weapon, more like an amplifier. It could link human minds together through a neural network, connecting thousands of consciousnesses into a single roaring signal. Not unified thought, the scientists were very careful about that. Unified thought would be orderly, and orderly was what the hollow wanted. Instead, the device would combine human chaos, multiply it, create a wave of contradiction so intense that anything trying to consume it might find itself consuming poison instead. Theory was one thing, testing was another. They needed volunteers, people willing to link their minds together and broadcast directly at the most dangerous entity in the universe. People willing to risk their sanity, maybe their lives, on an idea that might not work. Expected a few brave souls. He expected to have to beg and convince and promise. He was wrong. The call for volunteers went out across human space. Within a day, they had 100,000 names. Within a week, they had 10 million. Soldiers volunteered. Scientists volunteered. Teachers and farmers and artists and criminals volunteered. Old people who wanted to protect their, young people who wanted to prove they were brave. Ordinary people who had spent their whole lives feeling ordinary and finally saw a chance to matter. Read through the applications with tears in his eyes. One letter was from a woman who had lost her entire family when the hollow took her colony. She wrote that she had nothing left to lose and everything to give. Another was from a teenager who admitted he was scared, but said his fear did not matter compared to his people. This, realized, was humanity, not their technology or their colonies or their knowledge. This, the willingness to stand up against the impossible because someone had to. Observed the volunteers with something like awe. My people chose extinction because we could not imagine another way, the alien said. Your people are choosing to fight because they cannot imagine giving up. We're stubborn, said. You are remarkable. The final count was 10,000 volunteers, chosen from millions of applications. They came from every colony, every background, every belief system. They disagreed about politics and religion and whether pineapple belonged on pizza. They were messy and complicated and gloriously human. And one of them was. Tried to talk him out of it. You are valuable, the alien argued. Your knowledge of your understanding of the hollow, these things are needed. Shook his head. I'm not special, I'm just a man who ran away from his life because he lost the only person who made it worth living. But this is worth something. This matters. You could die. Everyone dies. I want to die for something instead of from something. Was silent for a long moment. Then the alien reached out with one of its 4 hands and touched on the shoulder. It was the first time they had made physical contact with any human. Said, your wife. She looked at the stars and saw stories. What would she say about this story? Closed his eyes. He could almost see her, standing by a window somewhere, watching the lights of distant suns. She would laugh, he thought. She would call him an idiot for volunteering, and then she would kiss him and tell him to come back safe. She would say it's a good story, whispered, one worth telling. The day of the operation arrived. 10,000 humans gathered at stations across the galaxy, each one connected to the neural network, each one ready to bear their mind against the darkness. Sat in a chair surrounded by equipment and screens. A technician fitted the neural interface to his head. Somewhere out in space, the hollow waited, vast and hungry and patient. Are you ready? Asked through the communication system. He thought about the who had chosen death. He thought about the 10,000 humans who had chosen to fight alongside him. Yes, he said, let's show this thing what humans are made of. The network activated, 10,000 minds opened to each other, and the storm began. Had never felt anything like it. 10,000 minds touched his at once. He felt their thoughts, their memories, their fears and hopes and dreams. A soldier remembering her first battle, a child thinking about his mother's cooking, an old man reliving his wedding day, a young woman angry about something so small and personal that almost laughed. It was chaos, beautiful, terrible, overwhelming chaos. The network amplified everything. Every emotion became stronger. Every memory became sharper. Every contradiction in every human mind against every other contradiction, until the signal was not just noise but a hurricane of consciousness, a scream of pure humanity directed at the void. The hollow noticed, felt it turn its attention toward them. It was not eyes exactly, not a gaze in any physical sense. It was more like the universe itself shifted, like reality bent to look at these tiny creatures who dared to make so much noise. For a moment nothing happened. The hollow simply observed, ancient and vast and curious. Then it began to feed. Felt the first touch like ice in his brain. The hollow reached into the network, trying to sort through the chaos, trying to find the patterns it needed to consume. It pushed against human thought, attempting to straighten the crooked lines, to calm the storms, to impose order on disorder. Somewhere in the network someone screamed, felt the pain echo through 10,000 connected minds. The hollow was strong, so impossibly strong. It had consumed entire civilizations. What was 10,000 humans compared to that? The pressure increased. Felt his thoughts beginning to flatten, his contradictions beginning to resolve into something simpler, something digestible. The hollow whispered to him without words, It promised peace. It promised clarity. It promised an end to confusion and doubt and pain. All he had to do was stop fighting. All he had to do was let the chaos die. Remembered. He remembered her laugh, the way she snorted when something was really funny. He remembered the argument they had the day before she died, something about dishes or laundry or some stupid thing he could not even recall anymore. He remembered hating that he could not remember. He remembered loving her so much that the hate did not matter. He held both feelings at once, love and grief, anger and tenderness, joy and sorrow. He refused to choose between them. He refused to simplify. The network felt it. 10,000 humans felt what was doing, and they responded. A soldier remembered fighting and fearing at the same time. A mother remembered loving her children and resenting them in the same breath. A scientist remembered the thrill of discovery and the terror of being wrong. An artist remembered creating something beautiful and knowing it would never be good enough. Every human in the network found their contradictions and held them tight. They refused to make sense. They refused to be orderly. They refused to be eaten. The chaos, the signal grew louder. The hurricane became a universe. And the hollow began to choke. Felt it recoil. The ancient pattern that had consumed civilizations for longer than stars had existed was struggling to swallow this meal. Human consciousness was not just noise. It was poison. It was a disease that attacked order itself. The hollow pushed harder. More volunteers collapsed. The pain became unbearable. Felt pieces of himself beginning to break, memories fragmenting, thoughts dissolving. He was dying, he realized. They were all dying. The hollow was too strong. But they were human, and humans did not stop. A voice rose in the network. Did not know whose it was. Maybe it was everyone's. The voice said one word, and that word spread through 10,000 minds like fire. More. They gave more. Every contradiction, every paradox, every beautiful mess that made them human. They poured everything they had into the signal, holding nothing back, burning like stars. The hollow screamed. It was not sound. It was reality itself shuddering, space twisting, something fundamental in the universe crying out in pain. The pattern that had ruled the void for eternity was breaking. Not dying, understood. You could not kill an idea, but breaking, fragmenting, scattering into pieces that would take eons to reassemble. The pressure vanished, the ice in his brain melted, the network went quiet. And then there was light. Opened his eyes. He was lying on the floor of the station, surrounded by medical teams rushing everywhere. His head hurt worse than anything he had ever felt, but he was alive. They all were. All 10,000 volunteers survived, though many would need months to recover. The neural network had done its job and then shut down before it could burn them out completely. Appeared on the communication screen, the aliens' lights pulsing with colors had never seen before. It worked, said. The hollow is retreating. It is fleeing back to the void between galaxies. Sat up slowly. Did we kill it? No, something that old cannot be killed, but you heard it. You heard it badly. It will take time to recover. Perhaps thousands of years, perhaps longer. So it will come back. Perhaps, but now you know how to fight it. Now you know that you can fight it. My people did not have that knowledge. My people chose death because we saw no other option. Thought about the 10,000 humans who had just stared into the void and refused to blink. We're too stubborn to die quietly. Yes, said, that is exactly what you are. The celebrations lasted for weeks. Humanity had faced extinction and survived, not through weapons or technology, but through the very thing that had always made them difficult: their chaos, their contradictions, their refusal to be simple. Return to Outpost 7 after everything calmed down came with him. What will you do now? Asked as they stood together, looking out at the stars through the outpost's windows. I do not know, admitted. I was created to warn. The warning has been delivered. My purpose is complete. Then find a new purpose. Turn those mirror eyes toward. My people sought perfection. We achieved it, and it destroyed us. You are gloriously imperfect. I think I would like to understand what that means. I think I would like to stay. Smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. Then stay. There's room. They stood together in silence, the last and the human who had found him. Outside, the stars burned on, each one a story waiting to be told. The hollow waited in the void, wounded but not dead. Other dangers lurked in the dark places of the universe. But humanity was still here. Messy, complicated, contradictory humanity. They had looked into the abyss and screamed back louder. He thought about how she would have loved this story. He thought about how she would have laughed and cried and probably yelled at him for almost getting himself killed. He missed her, he would always miss her. But for the first time in 2 years, the missing did not feel like drowning. It felt like remembering. It felt like honoring. It felt like living. Have said, "Yes. Welcome to humanity." The alien made that sound that might have been laughter. "Thank you. I suspect it will be a fascinating experience." Outside, the stars continued to burn. And somewhere in the hearts of 10,000 humans, the chaos that had saved them all continued to swirl, beautiful and stubborn and gloriously alive.